Hi, everybody. Welcome to their episode of the Beast of Burn podcast. This is your host, Jesse Knox. Beast of Burn is brought to you by Doubletree Habitat Enhancement Inc. We primarily do habitat consultations now. We do some brush management. If you have any inquiries about consultations or inquiries about forestry improvement or brush management, check us out at jknox0623@gmail.com. That is your contact. You can also reach out to me at Doubletree Habitat Enhancement Inc. on Facebook or Instagram at Beast of Burden Podcast, all one word. That handle is more for small habitat updates, what's going on in my life is for small things, hunting wise, and also show updates as well. We also have a growing YouTube channel at just Beast of Burden Podcast. We have longer habitat format there, content there. Check us out over there. If you want the show to grow, head on over to iTunes or Spotify and please leave a 5-star review and a positive comment if you deem it so worthy. That helps us out tremendously. And that's about it, folks. Tonight we have a special guest, Jeremiah Bryon of the Bigfoot Society Podcast. Now, this is a conservation channel. I mostly focus on improving your land, improving yourself as an individual. However, I do have a taste of the paranormal. I've had some weird stuff happen to me. I have a few Halloween specials. I've had another guest on, Bob Hicks from Tales in the Dark, fellow hunter, but also all kinds of paranormal hunter as well. And I do have a slight interest in it, and I thought it would be fun to chat with Jeremiah. He has a fantastic podcast. It's very high quality. He gives his guests a lot of attention. He lets them speak. He does not interrupt. He is just a high quality human being. And the stories that people submit, I don't know, guys. I don't know. And what the purpose of this is just to have a conversation. As you can see, our deer drive team is called Team Sasquatch. If you can't see it on you can't see the audio, but pretty much it's an orange hunting cap, says Team Sasquatch, and you have a silhouette of Sasquatch on there. Hope he doesn't mind. But no, I just find this topic interesting. I thought it'd be fun to have him on, just chat. It's my podcast. I can have whoever the hell I want on. You don't like it? Tune in for another episode. So we're going to take a quick pause and wait for our guests to come aboard. All right, everybody. Jeremiah Bryon of the Bigfoot Society. Welcome, sir.
Hey, how's it going, Jesse? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for agreeing to come on. I know we were just talking that my podcast is more conservation hunting. Your podcast is more about really Bigfoot research, Sasquatch research, letting people get their experiences out there. So two different worlds, but I've had several, I don't know if you want to consider Sasquatch paranormal, but I've had a lot of paranormal experiences. So it's kind of not super uncommon for me to talk about this stuff, but I'm also just interested in general anyway. So appreciate if you're coming on.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, a lot of people, when they think of Bigfoot, they're thinking of the Pacific Northwest, but it's crazy when you start to look into it, how much actually happens in our state of Iowa. Uh, sorry, I'm going to assume your listeners like know where you're based out of and,
Yes.
and all that
Mhm.
good stuff. Yeah. So we're both based out of the state of Iowa, and there's definitely more than a few squatchy things that happen in this state.
Isn't that wild? Well, before we get into it, I'd like to know more about you. Are you from Iowa originally?
So originally, I grew up in Western Massachusetts, and I moved out to Iowa about, I want to say, well, let's say about 2008 ish,
Okay.
and then
My
I married a girl out here, and married into a family. I was used to the smaller families, but out here the families are big,
oh
and
sure.
it's the farmer family. I love it, and yeah, just lived a little bit outside of central Iowa for the last few years in a nice little town, and yeah, it's just nice out here. It's cheap to live, but the people are really nice, and you can't beat it. So.
Absolutely. Did you grow up in the outdoors?
So my parents, my father specifically, they were he was a director at a summer camp for kids
Oh,
in
wow.
way out in the woods in western, well, out in the woods in Western Mass in a small mountain town. So I did grow up in a situation where I would be tracking animals out in the woods with my dad. He would teach me how to um, create kind of like bushcraft shelters before it was cool, right? Like
Yeah.
back in the day, 90s, stuff like that. Also, We did a lot of hiking on the Appalachian Trail out there. So I've hiked all of Massachusetts and Connecticut, and so growing up, definitely had a fun time. The main entertainment was doing stuff out in the outdoors. Now there wasn't any focus on Bigfoot at all, so I missed out on a lot on all the Bigfoot stuff in New England, unfortunately. But once I get out there next, I've got a few places I'll be checking out. So.
Cool. So what drew you to this subject?
So the subject of, and it, my podcast, Bigfoot Society, started out a little bit different. What originally drew me to it is I used to watch a lot of shows like In Search of and
Sure.
Unsolved Mysteries with my dad when I was a little kid.
Mm,
So I kind of got into the weird stuff at that point. Then during high school, went away from it. But then in I would say mid 20s, I was working at Apple in the mall, and met some other weird friends, and we realized, hey, we're into like stuff like cryptids and stuff like that. We realized that, hey, there's actually cryptids in Iowa in our area, like Van Meter, stuff like that. And so I started getting back into it. And then one of my buddies was involved with filming a documentary for Small Town Monsters where he was doing interviews.
huh.
And he said, hey, why don't you come along with me, see how it works? And I went. And when I got there, he was like, hey, I actually need someone to be off camera asking questions. Can you come up with questions
Oh,
kind of off the top of your head? And I was like, halfway through doing that, I was like, man, I love this. And it was 2019, so it was right before, that time. So I did start it in February 2019, but when I started it, it was just asking or talking to people about their love of cryptids. And then about a year and a half ago, I got into talking to people that had actually seen Bigfoot. And I was like, these people have been really affected by this. And
hmm,
it got to a point where I was like, I really like talking to these people that have had these interactions, and I feel like I can really help them work through some things that they haven't been able to work through. Some of these guys, it's the 20 years they've held on to this, and they
wow.
can't even sleep at night just because they have never been able to talk to someone who won't make fun of them, right? So, really, the podcast turned into what it is today about, I would say, a year and a half ago, where all I do now is I talk to people all over the US, and it's starting to turn into the world about their Bigfoot encounters. I'm starting to have people reach out from Australia,
Wow.
Nepal. It's not just the US anymore, and it's really turning into some crazy stuff. So,
That is so interesting. So, it's just so the audience, my audience probably is not super involved with the paranormal. How would you describe a cryptid to somebody that doesn't know?
so if we're gonna go with the actual definition of what a cryptid is, the original meaning is a cryptid is an undiscovered animal.
Hmm,
Now, if you look at, let's say, today's culture or today's generation, they are going to take the word cryptid and they're going to just turn it. It could be ghosts, it could be mechanical creatures, it could
hmm,
be aliens from outer space. But if you're going by the actual terminology from back in the day, the mid 1900s, um, it wasn't undiscovered animals. So, like your coelacanth,
right.
uh, all those types of deals. And yeah, that's how I would, and if things like the Loch Ness monster, Bigfoot, that's going to be a cryptid.
Right.
So.
Cool. Thanks for clearing that up.
Mhm.
So and that's the unique thing. I'm the weird guy that likes listening to like spooky stuff in the woods while I'm hunting because it just,
Mhm.
I don't know why for me, it corresponds a little bit. And of course, the sun sets. So I'm like, get me the hell out of here.
Right.
But yours, like I said, I'm not trying to brag you up. I just really enjoy just listening to people just get these stories out. And some are far out, but you know what? I'm a far out kind of guy, and I really enjoy that kind of stuff. And it's just, I really appreciate you giving the platform just to go as far as you want to, man, and just let it get it out. So I want to work up to that point, but when, when, when did you have a moment while doing this podcast? You're like, this thing is real.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say there are different stages to me knowing and I'll kind of explain that. So I have a buddy, his name is Tate Hieronymus. He's a Bigfoot researcher out of Florida, but he mainly does things with the Bluff Creek Project out of, he goes out to California a lot in the Pacific Northwest. So over the last few years, he was always like, man, I got to get you out in the field. We got to go out somewhere so that you can know better how to talk to the people you talk to. And I'm like, that's a great idea. So eventually he took me to a place that he knows in Iowa. And so we go out there, and it's August. It's super hot. It's like 110 degrees, heat index. Nothing's really happening. But then the next day drops about 30 degrees and stuff starts to happen. We have a tree get pushed over like 30 feet outside of our camp. We get wood knocks, and this is happening all around our campsite. We didn't have to go out in the woods. At that point, I started to, okay, there's something out here, right? And then the next year we went back again. I heard some whoops from my tent. And there's some other stuff that happened. Those are the highlights. And I was like, yeah, okay, this is real. When it really got real is when, so I went out to Oak Ridge, Oregon, which is in the Willamette National Forest this summer in July. And I went out there for a festival because I got invited. They were like, you should come out here, talk to the people in the town. Everyone's seen a Bigfoot. It'd be perfect. We got a place for you to stay. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I'm all about it. Let's go. When I went out there, some of the locals that I'd interviewed before, these old timers, they took me out in the woods to their spot where they had interactions. Pretty much they had a few Bigfoot creatures run up the side of the mountain towards their campsite and just pretty much almost rushed through their tent for hours one night. So they take me to their meadow area, which is about 30 miles out in the woods. When we're out there, dude, it was crazy. There's a few things that pushed me from 99% way over the edge. First thing was this older gentleman named Ronnie. He plays his guitar out there because that's how he connects to them emotionally.
Interesting.
And so he's playing his guitar. It's like 60s music.
Mm-hmm.
And a minute into it, all of a sudden we hear something from the woods, and it was like this huge roar / scream thing. And dude, like all the blood rushed from my head. And it was like, I was just like, oh, what's happening? And like, it was to the point where like my ears actually turned off. Like I don't remember hearing the whole thing. And I think that's because the blood rushed down my head. I don't know. So there was that. But then the other weird thing, this really messed with me, was there was a film crew that was there in the same area the day before. They had actually seen one jump out of a tree and rush off towards the edge of the meadow. So I missed that. But they had put fruit up in a tree. They put a banana, an apple, and an orange up in a tree. And so I was like, oh, let's go over and see what happened to that. So we go over to this gifting area where Ronnie usually gifts stuff. And the apple and the orange are on the ground, but the banana, so keep in mind, this is 30 miles out in the woods. There is no one else around. The banana was on the ground, and it was peeled and eaten just laying there. And I was like, oh man, that really, like, that messed me up for a good solid few weeks, because I was like, man, something has to have hands to peel that. This is weird. And then I looked a little closer, and there was like 15, 16-inch indentation in the ground next to the tree that it was in. And the area where it jumped out of the tree on the edge of the meadow, I actually went over there. I did find a track in the ground. That was also, we were able to bring an individual to that area a few days later who is very well known, who doesn't want his name out there. But if you've seen Bigfoot shows, you've seen this guy.
Gotcha.
And I was like, hey, check this out, guy. And he's like, oh, that's cool. And then he looks around for a little bit, and he's like, oh, there's another one. And there's another one. And look, that's how its toes are splayed out. And I was like, oh, man. So, yeah, that is what took me from 99% to like 150. And it's a wild story. You know, my legs ended up I got some infection, and I had to go to urgent care and get antibiotics because my legs almost got
Hmm.
like some serious infection.
Oh my.
Just a really, really weird trip, but I'm headed back next year, and actually this year, headed back this July to hopefully do it all again without the infection part. So
Wow, man. That's wild.
yeah.
That's so,
Oh yeah.
and one thing I want to ask you, I'm trying to see as I listen to these stories, I'm trying to see a pattern, and it seems like it's really random when people come
Hmm.
across, because like I have an uncle who lives in northern Idaho. He's hunted that area, and you just had a guy from Kellogg submit a story not that long ago. Kellogg, Idaho.
Oh
He's north of Kellogg. He's never seen it, and
yeah.
he's like, I don't get what you guys are seeing. I never seen one. I think they're nuts, is what he says, And it's like, well, part of it, he runs some hounds for bears, but also he's hunting elk at the same time. And obviously, you don't use hounds to elk, it's a spot and stalk situation. And you're kind of
Hmm.
like, you do wonder when someone's practically living out there most of his life. And the other guys just happen to, like, you've never been to Oregon and you have all these experiences and you're taken to a spot. And it's like, I'm gonna bring my woo factor in. Do you think it's a frequency? Do you think it's just what do you think the pattern is why some people see them and some people don't?
So yeah, this is where it can get a little weird. And this is also something that happened when I was out in Oregon in the same area. So the cool thing was that I was able to go up to that meadow area multiple times with multiple types of people. Anyone from people that are like totally like mind open, let's get weird, to the guys that are also like, all I care about is evidence. I don't care about the weird stuff. All I care about is show me a footprint, right? I will tell you this. Things happened in that area that we knew. So this area is known to be active. Things happened in that area when certain people were in it that didn't happen when the person who was not into the weird stuff at all
Hmm.
was there. It was very, very strange. For example, when s- the one individual left and all the other people were just there hanging out that were into weird stuff, we actually ended up getting some interesting sounds recorded. This guy was just randomly capturing video with his iPhone. He actually got some audio recorded. I picked it out when I was listening or watching his videos, and I sent it over to a gentleman. His name is David Ellis from the Olympic Project. He's probably one of the best individuals the Bigfoot community has for looking into sound. And he heard it and he was like, this is very interesting because the part that I thought was a human talking, he's like, dude, that's not a human talking.
Oh
It's
my.
too low on the
Oh my.
scale. But what it is he's starting to see a pattern where there's almost this precursor to language that is being caught in different areas. And it's very similar to, there's a study that's being done in Germany with a certain orangutan, and they're catching different parts of like weird tongue clicks and pops. And people are catching this in areas such as the Pacific Northwest, but also in Tennessee as well. It's very, very strange.
Interesting.
I don't know.
That's the thing I was wondering about, because I mean, I've been in Van Buren County and you had one gal on from that area, which was really wild. And, I've never seen anything. I've heard, actually, I had a couple experiences I want to tell you about later that
Okay.
were vocal. And it was kind of like, I kind of
Oh, wow.
forgot that happened after I emailed you. But anyway, and it's like, I'm into the woo stuff too, but I've shared it I have a couple Halloween specials on my podcast where I've had demonic encounters, but also angelic
Oh,
encounters, and it's
okay.
like, and you kind of wonder. I believe in a form of frequency where certain entities and us ourselves are on different wavelengths and frequencies that we might tune up with certain things. Like, for example,
Mm-hmm.
here's a prime example. So my dad passed away from ALS, and our house,
Mm,
when he was passing, was really dark. I guess what,
yeah.
buddy? I saw shadows go across the wall. I don't know where they came from. And I was getting
Oh,
into the
wow.
paranormal at that point. Saw a lot of shadow people because our family was in a lower frequency. We were feeling more negative emotions. You draw negative things in. Now I'm in a part of my life. I'm trying to walk in abundance, generosity,
Mm-hmm.
gratitude, joy. Well, guess what? My wife and I have had a couple angelic encounters because we're in a higher frequency. And some mama listeners might go, "This guy's out of his mind." I don't care. There is something to that when I'm giving off a certain kind of emotion. I'm seeing things in a different light versus in a shadowy light. I see more darker entities. And that's just been my experience. So there must be some kind of mindset someone has to have. And maybe I use this scripture often, some with the heart of a child that
Hmm.
encounters these things more often. And there's been some stories that, oh, that was pretty rough. That thing I would not want to be alone with. And then there's some stories it's like, well, kumbaya, my lord, around the campfire, you know? So it's like there's definitely it's certain people that they seem to be drawn to, and then there's certain people that they have just different experiences with across the board.
Absolutely. And did all that happen in Van Buren County as well?
So one, I heard a howl that I cannot tell you what it was. I've been
Okay.
around coyotes all my life, and this I do not know what it was. I was 16. I heard a now this was I'll tell you this quick story. As a side note, do you know who Sean Clenn is? Does that name ring a bell?
No.
John Clenn, he is a Navajo content creator, and he has a
Okay.
lot of stories on skinwalkers, Bigfoot, little people. Super cool
Mhm.
dude. And he was sharing, he goes, "You don't whistle at night on the Navajo reservation because you
Right.
just attract things." And he said he said a story, and this happened to me. These dogs were barking, going nuts, and there's a whistle off in the distance. The dogs went quiet. Okay. So I'm on my farm. I'm doing some we call it basil bark spraying. I'm killing multiflower rose with a certain herbicide. I'm walking around my woods. My neighbor, who's got 3 dogs, they hear me, they're going nuts. And Jeremiah, I kid you not, I hear a whistle to the south of me going, those dogs went quiet.
Mm.
And I'm, you know, I have another neighbor's got hounds. I don't think he has some kind of training whistle. I don't think that's what it was. I asked my neighbor, go, what do you think that was? He goes, I don't know, man. You know, so I've had things I've heard. I've been warned about a couple things. And the warnings took place in Jefferson County, where you're our friends from. You can call her. So anyway, um, but I haven't seen anything or been. Well, there's one time. I'll add this real quick. Hi, buddy. Um, I same farm. I was doing my work. It was kind of a twilight scenario, right? Sun's coming out. There's some clouds, and it's kind of snowing, kind of drizzling. I'm still doing my work, and I see a lot of stuff corner my eye, which I'm very much like either it's a trick of the light or I saw something. I don't know. I'm not banking on it. I swore I saw a hairy arm wrap around a tree, and I turned around and it went back around. And I was just kind of like, okay, what the hell was that? And I look around the tree, there's nothing there. So I'm like, was it a vine? Was it the trick of the light? But I remember seeing fingers. I could see hair, you know, it was so brief. And I was like, I don't care. I'm gonna get back to work, you know. But anyway, that happened in my farm, Van Buren County as well. So who knows?
Um, I'm not surprised at all. And you already talked about how, I do have it's a um 2 episode series with
Bigfoot Ranch, right?
Connie. Yeah, the Bigfoot Ranch, and that takes place in Van Buren County, and that's just uh, it's a tale of a lady that had a habituation uh, happening in Van Buren County, and just so wild, wild stuff in that. I mean, it was so crazy that they were feeding them pancakes and syrup on their back porch, and
That wild.
I, it's wild. So the area of Van Buren County, I got to be a little careful, but it's known for Bigfoot. There's a lot of dogman activity, and this is Lacey Keosauqua State Park has
Mhm.
had dogman activity. I've heard from certain researchers, also Bigfoot. Just that area of how the river does that curve, right?
Sure.
The Des
Yep.
Moines River.
Yep.
There's a lot of activity reported over there, and there's also a lot of Native American history in that area too. And I think that might all be connected. There's also an older gentleman I talked to. He had an interesting anecdote he shared with me a few years ago. He was up by the Eldon Dowds area,
Yep. Yep.
and he had told me that his grandparents, so older gentleman, his grandparents told him a story that back in the 40s in that area, there was something in that area they would call the Yehudis,
Yeah. Hooties.
and they weren't calling them Bigfoot, but
Yeah.
they were calling them some kind of giant creature that would live in the Eldon Dowds area of Iowa in Van Buren County. And I thought that was fascinating because I haven't seen that anywhere else
Now, wasn't
reported.
Yahoo, was that an Appalachian term for
Yeah,
Sasquatch?
exactly. So Yahoo was, I think, down in Tennessee and definitely in West Virginia. But yeah, Yehudis, I've only heard this down in this one area in Iowa.
That's interesting. Now, I was trying to
Yeah.
research that too, and you mentioned that. I was curious about that. One thing
Hmm.
I noticed, I have an interest in megalithic structures and, the
Mm.
theories of the pyramids and stuff like that. And the one thing I noticed about Southeast Iowa, if you ever, I don't know if you ever looked into it, we have a large magnetic anomaly, and it's
No.
all over from like Van Buren up to Muscatine. And it's funny how that follows the river valleys. But also, they claim that some of these megalithic structures are on top of magnetic anomalies. So, it makes me wonder because I'm going to go deeper woo. I don't care if losing listeners. This is fun for me.
You'll
Um,
probably get more listeners, to be honest.
well, yeah, I mean, we're talking about some cool stuff. I don't
Yeah,
care.
it is.
It's beyond Sasquatch. Okay. It's beyond
Hmm.
some hairy guy in the woods. I'm not being derogatory and just being honest. It's
Right.
about the human story and how deep our frequencies can go. And also what it mean. Like if we are in a third dimension, we have a fourth and fifth dimension beyond us. What's that mean for our capabilities as human beings overall? To me, and the deeper human story, Sasquatch is just a symptom of what we do not know about. I mean, I've heard quite a few stories in your podcast of this thing going between portals. And I'm like,
Yeah.
it doesn't need conservation status. If it can go to a different dimension on its own, it's like, it's its own thing. And we just have no idea what we're capable of. So, but I want to share though, I just want to get back to the magnetic anomaly. I'm curious if these areas are able to attract just due to different frequencies or however the land's laid out. I know we have the large amount of lime from these lime quarries down here as well. And with the river and the magnetic anomaly, I just wonder if it's just kind of a big um, correlation to have these things occur more due to these geographical locations and whatnot.
So I do know I'm thinking of a certain area out in Oregon near Cottage Grove. There's a book you can read on this called The Owl Moon Lab. One of my friends, Tobe Johnson, and this area had so much weird stuff happening, but they figured out that there was a few different things about this area. It had a lot of power lines in the area, but it also had a water flowing through it, but it also had tons of quartz. So I think that there's definitely something, as you kind of laid out yourself, is certain type of rock. I think you have to look into what kind of rock is in the area. Is there a river source? Are there springs underground? The weird thing about Iowa is, you've got the Des Moines River that
Yep.
goes down by your
Yep.
area as well. If you look into Bigfoot sightings, man, they are all up and down the Des Moines River. You can look, I mean, off the top of my head, all the way up to Boone, past Boone to Fraser. They go, I've gotten some from Saylorville Lake. There's one reported in it was kind of central Des Moines, but it was like the Birdland Marina area back in the 70s or 80s. And it just keeps on going. You can follow down the entire Des Moines River all the way down to the Missouri border, and you can get Bigfoot sightings all the way. So, as the famous quote goes, they follow the creeks, from the Boggy Creek Monster. But I think, if you have a river that has a lot of curves to it, you're probably going to be finding some Bigfoot reports there if you dig deep enough.
That's interesting. Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, if people think, well, Iowa's just open and flat. It is not. I mean,
No.
Northeast Iowa, it's hill country. Southeast Iowa, it reminds me. It's like geographically, it's not listed at, but it almost reminds me of the beginning zone of the Ozark Plateau. They call it the Southern
Hmm.
Driftless Plains, I believe it's called. So, you know, I've been down the Mon River bow fishing with buddies, and I'm like, it gets pretty remote. It's just not all farm fields. I mean, there's a lot of timbered river ridges. And apparently, Connie was suggesting that there's caves around the Dowd's Quarry, which people don't know. Dowd's is the largest lime quarry in Iowa. And it's like, I've never been there. I've never been in the quarry. I've been by it several times. I'm like, I don't know, maybe, but it's like,
Mm.
but also, again, I kind of, I have a hard time believing these things are just camping out in an oak tree somewhere or in a cave. If these things are truly interdimensional, they just come and go as they please whenever they feel like it, you know. And I don't know. I got some friends. We're into weird stuff. Like I got a good friend of mine who's high up in the government. He talks about channeling Pleiadians, you know, and I'm like, I'm so glad you're in the government
Oh,
right
nice.
now. And
That's cool.
apparently Pleiadians like Trump, apparently. So take that as you will. But anyway,
Okay, there you
they
go.
were talking about how these cryptids are in a different dimension. And I wonder, well, people talk about like a food source being enough to sustain these things. If they're in a different dimension, they can come and go. What else is on the other dimension we don't know about, can't see that that's a food source for, and other things too, you know, and why they come back and forth, I don't know, you know. So I don't know. The to me, the interdimensional thing makes more sense to me because how, you know, I just kind of look at it as like, think about the black bear and the bison that have been all over this country. And now they're starting to come back. Iowa's starting to bear sightings again, Northeast Iowa. And it's taken, you know, probably 100 years to get this far. And these guys have been hanging around in Van Buren. I mean, bears have been expedited from Van Buren for over 100 years, you know, and they're still there.
Oh,
And you're
wow.
like, either they're master high, I'm talking about Bigfoot, not black bears. I'm just meaning like they've been
Oh,
expedited from
okay.
Van Buren County
Gotcha.
100 years, but they're still they're not back yet. But then Bigfoot or Sasquatch has been here. I don't know. Do you think they're interdimensional at this point, or do you think they're an actual? What I guess I should ask you, what does Bigfoot mean to you at the end of the day? What do you think this being
Right, right, right.
really is?
So the way I look at it currently, and this could change so quickly, but right now, what I think is, I think that we are looking at some kind of undiscovered creature that can do a lot of really weird stuff, like a ton that can just blow science away. There's
Mind
no
speak.
way that they know what's going on. And I mean, you can look at other animals that do weird stuff, right? I mean, just look at the platypus.
Yeah,
Look at the echidna that
yeah.
has electrical sensors in its face. Um, there's a lot of weird stuff out there in nature. Now, caveat, if I'm out in Oregon and I see a Bigfoot step out of a portal like it did on Skinwalker Ranch, I may have to rethink
Right,
what my definition is, right? But for
right.
right now, that's where I'm at.
That's interesting. Um,
Yeah.
oh, you said something. I was going to ask you this question. Shoot. Portals. That's about portals. Yeah, they'll come back to me in a second here. If I just let it go, it'll come back. I can't let it go, Jeremiah. I got to think about it for a second.
Oh, I know what that's like, man. I get
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, that so on the idea of that was what I asked you. I remember now. So when you go on these expeditions, are you how much I should ask this question. How much
Mhm.
of the research community is focused on proving it exists versus this is my personal experiences thing. I'm just interested in having experience over instead of trying to prove to the world that Bigfoot is walking around us.
That is a really good question. I wish more people would think of that. I think it's kind of split down the middle. I feel that the boots on the ground, decked out camo guys are more like, we're going, let's prove this exists, but I also want to get my name out there. And I'll let you know that I might get in trouble, but those guys really don't experience much.
Is that interesting?
And I think that's where that whole intention comes back in. Now, the guys that are out there that are just hanging out, sitting in a nylon chair, and they're just chilling out. Maybe they're talking out loud to the forest, stuff like that. They're gonna have weird stuff happen. For example, like I was out with a film crew out in Oregon. This is a weird thing. And I guess this might be able to be, this could have been another animal, but this guy was just shining his flashlight into the edge of the meadow, shone it over one area, boom, loud crack, loud branch snap. Like the second he puts his flashlight over it, I was like, that's just weird. That's really
Mm.
weird. I don't know that Oregon, dude. If you've never been out to the Pacific Northwest, or any of your listeners haven't been out there yet, I'd probably recommend it because it will change the way you look at stuff. And I'm not just saying like hanging out in Portland. I'm just saying like go out in the woods with someone. Go out in the woods that's with someone that knows what they're doing, and it'll make you look at things a whole lot differently. It's
Do you
pretty cool.
have
But
you heard the term lusting for results?
no, but I think I get what you mean. But explain what your definition of it is.
So I've been researching more how our subconscious mind works, and it's kind of like a
Mm,
circuit. So say like for manifestation, for example, or in setting intention, the goal is you think about it, you kind of visualize it, how you want it to happen, or how you expect it, and then just let it go, forget about it. And then over
okay.
time, at some point it will. Like, for example, I went deer hunting tonight. I've been after deer for weeks, and I'm like, man, I'll go to spots, see what happens. I wasn't even thinking about the deer. I was actually thinking about putting a trail camera up. And then there's a deer. And I was able to harvest a deer tonight. And I was like, wow, I wasn't even thinking about actually coming in contact with a deer. I wasn't lusting after it, just happened. So I kind of wonder, did the guys just chilling out in a chair at a campfire, if they're not really lusting, they're not, I gotta prove a point, blah, blah, blah. Then stuff seems more drawn. It's more likely happening. Just let it go.
Mm. That's really interesting. I think the people I've been out with that do that, they're very like, you know, I'm just here to experience whatever happens. I don't care if my name gets out there or if I'm not here to become some famous explorer. I'm just
Yeah.
here to connect with whatever's out here. It is a very, very interesting experience. So,
Um, yeah, that's for sure. Dang it. You keep saying these good points. I want to ask you more questions. I keep forgetting, my mind's going like 100 miles a minute right now. um, so with, oh yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Have you interviewed Mel Scahan yet?
no, he's on my list to talk to. I have a list of people that I'm contacting. He's actually on the list right now. He's just such an interesting gentleman.
He's great. If people don't know, he is from the Yakima Nation in Washington, and he's been in the forestry department, I guess. I'm not sure the state of the reservation. I'm not sure the nation, but he has been in the woods all his life and has had some
Mm,
very profound stories. And even, yeah. But anyway, what I was listening to an interview, I always like the sound of his voice, that deep bass he's got. But
right.
anyway, he was saying they've had way more experiences, like you just said, just a few guys camping out, making a normal event, and then they'll start hearing footsteps and heavy breathing. So the thing that really freaks him out is like he's in his tent and he sees his gigantic hands rub against the nylon of his tent. And I'm like,
Yeah, dude.
oh my God. But he's like, it's besides being enroached upon, it's a bit more they see more stuff that way.
Mhm.
So it's just interesting,
Absolutely.
you know. Interesting.
Absolutely.
Um, so I've been down the rabbit hole in your podcast, like I've said, and I've heard some interviews refer to Sasquatch as Nephilim. And for my listeners, if you don't know your scripture, the Nephilim is during Genesis when fallen angels
Mhm.
would breed with human women, and then these giants were born. To quote Genesis, there are giants in those days.
Right.
And then there's my kind of people. I'm a Christian, but I'm more of a woo Christian for sure. You have like we talked about, more of like this frequency spiritual guy. You've had a gentleman named Bear. He's from a First Nation tribe in California, I
Oh yeah.
believe. I love
Bears
that guy's
Wild.
story,
Yep.
man. That goes so cool. I mean, they're pretty much, like I said,
Yeah.
kumbaya on the campfire. But the people that are claiming Nephilim, it seems like they had more negative experiences. And when do you think the negative experiences are due to geographical locations, just that particular clan or culture, or do you think this just came to me, people looking for these things, they're projecting certain things out, what they're expecting, maybe they're not even consciously aware, they're subconsciously expecting this thing to be ferocious, then in return will act ferocious, versus someone like Bear who's comfortable with them.
Yeah. It's so interesting because there are areas of the country that seems like all the reports that come out are very, aggressive, especially like Southeast Oklahoma. And in talking to researchers down there about that, I think that might have something to do with the way that the people are down there and how they're treating, uh,
Oh,
whatever these Bigfoot are, however you want to look at what they are, because I think it's almost like a circular thing. There's some pretty intense stories out of there, out of Southeast Oklahoma, like the siege at Honabi, where there's an individual, they had a log cabin on this property and they were keeping deer in chest freezers on their porch. And this is around the year 2000, 2001. And pretty much the Bigfoot were coming up on the porch and stealing the frozen
oh,
deer. Now it got to the point where they were starting to like jiggle the door and trying to
oh,
get in through the windows. And it was two adult male, two adult, male humans in there, but also there's a family in there too. So there's, you know, people that you did not want to, Bigfoot to come in and mess with. So the males of the house ended up actually taking their rifles and shooting one of them, and then it ran off towards the forest line or the wood line. Now, the weird thing is that the story goes, it actually ended up passing away, and allegedly two other Bigfoot carried it off, which is a pretty wild story to believe. But the story goes, and it's reported in the paper, at least one of the papers down there, is that there was a trucker that was driving through the area of Honabi and saw what he said looked like two Bigfoot carrying a dead Bigfoot across the road.
okay.
And it was so wild that the trucker actually turned around multiple times to go back and forth to look. He was like, what am I seeing right now? Uh, that's one example of how, maybe humans don't treat them in the best way. And then, the Bigfoots get to talking and they're like, we're just going to start messing up all the humans that are around here. You also have, some really interesting Native American stories. I've talked to some people involved with the Prince of Wales Island area of Southeast Alaska. And man, all the stories that come out of there, especially the four-toed Sasquatch on that island, are just so aggressive. And a lot of them what is said is a lot of people that go missing on that island is allegedly connected to this clan of Sasquatch. Uh, it was very interesting to think about. I don't know.
Absolutely. So while I was listening to that Oklahoma story, I think the guy went by name Country.
Yeah,
That
that
was a wild
guy's
story, and
yeah.
he claimed he shot a bunch. And, the only, and, I'm at the point now in this conversation, and not just conversation, I misspoke. In the world I'm in with paranormal stuff, you don't have to believe me. It is what it is. I put my stories out there. It's like, this is what I experienced.
Mhm.
Either I'm nuts or something happened. I could hear someone say, well, isn't that convenient? They hauled off their corpses, but at the
Right.
same time, it's like, well, if they're human like, obviously they honor their dead. And they're like, we know what you people do with animals and other things. We know about your labs. We're not letting our fallen brother get butchered on the operating table. I mean,
Mhm.
so if they are, they have a consciousness and are very emotionally intelligent, I could see that that's me top priorities, get that their comrade or whatever you want to call it away.
Yeah, definitely. There's and it's a thing where you can't really prove it at all, but some people will be like, well, where did the bodies go, right? And a lot of people in the community actually think that they do bury their dead. I don't know where that comes from because we don't have any people that have actually seen that, but that's the story that gets passed around the community. So,
I mean, I know there's been some talk that some clans are cannibals. I hate to go this topic. Do you think they consume their dead?
I've heard that. I have never heard of any accounts or reports to back that up, but I do know that is something like a legend that gets passed around the, community campfires, as it were.
Sure. I mean, there
But
is some,
yeah,
I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize.
no, you're good.
There is some indigenous tribes, I think in Asia, and I'm totally grow out my butt. I think that's
Mm.
a practice in some
Okay.
nations, not all, but you kind of wonder if it's, and yeah, I don't know. It just it's a morbid thought, but you kind of wonder, well, I don't know. No, it is interesting. And the reason it kind of makes sense that they did bury their dead, if they are, that they do honor, I could see them doing it. Now, is there proof? No, but it's interesting to think about and it would actually explain a lot, but,
Absolutely.
and again, they're dimensional. They just probably were going back to, whatever dimension we're from and to a, I don't know, Viking burial. I don't know. No, this whole thing is so interesting. And it's just such a wild world we live in. And, to me, it's not even about Sasquatch. There's just a lot of weird stuff going in the world. I saw some article on Google about, car-sized drones being found in the ocean off the Atlantic Ocean. You're kind of like, where are these coming from? So it's, we live in a wild world, and you just never know what's going to pop around the corner next. And I don't think the conversation is so wild because the truth is becoming more stranger than fiction as of now.
I think that I think we're getting to the point where people are starting to come forward. And there's a lot of people, I forget that there are people that listen to the stuff I put out. And I am starting to get more and more emails from park rangers, forestry workers
Wow.
that are sharing stories. I got a park ranger from the Smoky Mountains. I get a worker actually from Yellow River in Iowa. And when I press these guys, I'm like, hey, would you want to come on the podcast to share what has happened to you? They just disappear.
Mm.
And I think there must be something where, their job is threatened or they don't want to lose their current employment. But
Sure.
I think we are at the point where, honestly, I think it's going to take one person to come on a podcast that's like a legit park ranger, and it's just going to break the dam, and just people are just going to come forward all over the place. Because the stuff I hear that is, not public right now, it's all got to come out. And maybe they have to wait until they're retired, but I don't
Right.
know. I just think, as you were saying, there's weird stuff out there in the skies. I think info is going to start coming out more about the weird stuff on the ground as well.
Right.
So,
Well, one of my favorite guests you had on, Robin, she's talking about how we're kind of going
oh,
through this uh,
absolutely.
transcendental dimensional shift. And, yeah, I mean, I feel like there's more people waking up to what's really going on in our food, how our lives are managed, and, evidence of a holographic universe. And you're kind of like, what else is next? And I wanted to ask about that. Not just her specifically, but there seems to be certain individuals that they just get along well with these things, like Connie, Rob. What was the one lady? She had a Bigfoot friend named Fox. Janet Miter, was that her name?
Janet Carter.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yes, I am not overly familiar with that story, but it is a pretty wild one. I think that's Tennessee. It, but it's one of those habituation deals where you can look into that story, and I think it's the book 50 Years with Bigfoot. If you can find it, there's audio versions of it on YouTube,
Oh my.
so you can actually listen to it because it's expensive to track down. But it's one of those stories that is very close to Connie's, where the Bigfoot were hanging around for multiple generations. They were feeding the Bigfoot, which, if you're in that situation, I wouldn't recommend doing it because eventually you'll stop doing it and then
They get mad.
you'll be in a whole bad situation. Usually that doesn't end up well. So,
So,
but
well,
dude,
that's
you
my
should, real quick, have you considered going out to the Nebraska Bigfoot conference? Have you heard about
um,
that?
you know, brother, let me be honest with you. I find this topic fascinating, but I don't know if I'm at the point where you're at. Where I'm going to commit to going to a conference. Just to be honest
Totally
with you.
got it.
But if the opportunity came up, I wouldn't mind going to see what's all about.
Absolutely. Because Robin goes to that one out in
Oh, okay, cool,
Nebraska in April. Just heads
gotcha.
up. But
No, that's
yeah,
cool.
no, I agree. It's a different. it's one thing to talk about it for an hour rather than to, okay, now I'm gonna like fly somewhere or go to some festival and just like chill out with the people that are into it, which is a fun, you know, if you want to do that locally, you can always go to the Van Meter Visitor Festival every
Oh,
September. And there's some Bigfoot people there too, but
gotcha.
it's a fun
Gotcha.
time.
But what I'm curious is, what do you think is about those individuals that are able to form a relationship with these things?
It's interesting. Usually these individuals are very open
Hmm.
to pretty much everything. Um, they have a very positive mindset. Um, there's usually some form of telepathy involved. Almost always 100%. I can almost, you know, check off the boxes when I'm talking to the person. If it's a person that's kind of, you know, like Robin or these, you know, types of people that have these witnesses that have them around their house, they're usually very open. They have a positive intent. They're able to have some sort of communication with them, either verbally or non-verbally through their mind. Um, and I think really what it comes down to is the intention of the person. Um, Usually there's it, and it's weird to say, but like an outpouring of love from the person. They're not there to try to shoot it or to try to get the first one on their wall or, you know, get the hunting
Right.
permit down in Oklahoma that you might have heard about. They're in there. They usually think of them more as like the forest people or like a lost um, uh,
Family
tribe of
member.
people
Yeah.
in the U.S., stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Absolutely.
I don't think it's a bad thing. You know, I mean, usually these people that I talk to, they seem to be nice people.
Yeah.
They are usually way, way out there though, you know, which is cool. But
Well, like Connie started telling there's a portal on the Des Moines River. I'm like, Van Buren, yeah, maybe. It's
yeah.
like, and that's a thing, Jeremiah, I'm originally from Michigan. My dad moved us down here for deer hunting back in 2004. And
Oh,
my life
wow.
has been so weird. I just, the people I've met, my wife, she's not weird, but I just marrying her family, they're organic and just this holistic mindset. It's totally changed my life. And I've had a spiritual
Mm,
journey and it's conservation. It's just such a weird life I have compared to normal 9 to 5 mainstream stuff.
oh, yeah.
And I kind of wonder, like, why of all places, Southeast Iowa, besides the deer hunting, and I have an interest in this stuff. And I'm just kind of like, I don't know. I just feel like from that story, it just kind of some click, like it means something, and I like to explore more of that. I'm not sure I want to go to her farm if it's even accessible, but it's like, yeah, I know. It just, there's got to be a reason why these people meet these things. And there's, like you said, they kind of this pure of heart in a way. And, that was one question.
Absolutely.
Intrusive thoughts. These things are telepathic. I kind of wonder if someone deals a lot of intrusive thoughts, are they like, are they like, oh, this guy just too much chatter. Don't worry about him. I'm kind of wondering about what that would mean if they, like I say, I'm out in the woods. I'm like, I don't want to hurt you, but you have these weird intrusive thoughts come in and say, shoot one. I'm like, I don't want to shoot one. I want to just let me be me, you guys be you. And I kind of wonder if they pick up on even those intrusive thoughts or not.
Yeah. The whole telepathy thing is weird because
Mhm.
there's some people that say they actually have they hear a voice in their head that is a totally different voice. But then there's sometimes they hear their own internal thoughts, but saying something that they would never say. And, you know, kind of
Right.
like an intrusive thought type thing. That's a whole tricky thing because I don't know how you can prove or disprove that unless it happens to you, right? I think that honestly, it comes down to what your intention is.
Right.
And if you're gonna go hunting in an area where there's a big Bigfoot presence or like weird stuff happens, probably have the best intentions in mind, just in case. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. I had a couple more questions for, I'll let you go. I was curious about a couple things on the technical side.
yeah.
What is infrasound regarding Sasquatch?
So from what I know, and I'm not a technical science guy, but infrasound is a thing that some predators can do, and it's a very low, a low sound, but it can be used in so in the Bigfoot world, it can be used to potentially paralyze prey or to hurt prey. It can cause and not even prey, but just something, right? It can cause headaches, stomach aches, um, out in Oregon in that meadow area. And I don't know if this was infrasound per se, but I can say that when I was sitting in one of the chairs, there was a 5 minute or the 5 minute period where I found myself looking into the tree line and I could not move. And
That's weird.
all of a sudden, like 5 minutes, I was just like, and then I can move around. It's very strange. Um,
Almost like waking, or instead of sleeping paralysis, you have waking paralysis instead.
it was very strange. So in the community, people will think that like you know the some of the big cats, I believe, do infrasound as well.
Mm.
They believe that Bigfoot has access to that ability as well, which is interesting. There was an individual that I just interviewed. Her name is Marcia. She's with the BFRO. She actually has a device where she can. This is fascinating stuff. She can actually. I'm trying to think of how she can see the infrasound as it comes in, and then a few seconds later, they'll get like the tree knock or the thing that's usually
Whoa.
associated with the Bigfoot activity. So in essence, she can prove that yes, it is Bigfoot. Also, she has a device that can create infrasound in the same way. She told me I've only done that once because immediately after I did that in this one area, I was just bluff charged out of nowhere. And she was like, I'll never do that again. It was the most horrifying thing ever. So
Whoa.
yeah, the BFRO has some wild, wild stuff that happens on their expeditions.
Wow. Now, the term zapped, is that with infrasound as well?
Yeah, so zapped is it's kind of like the slang version of infrasound, and um, from what I know, and I don't think I've experienced anything the per se the zapped, but there's some people where they'll say it can kind of cause them a kind of a pain or a headache in a way, and I hope hopefully I'll never have to deal with that, but that's more in the South. I hear that being thrown around where, oh, I got zapped or I've been zapped 10 times out in the field. It's kind of a slang thing. So,
Oh, mine. No, and I was going to ask you about geographic. Can't cover that already. Okay. No, that's interesting. That just something to be aware of. And that's the thing. I was like you. I grew up like watching Travel Channel shows and stuff. You just hear about people seeing this stuff. A couple of the Memorial Day footage, Patterson Gimlin
right,
film,
right. Yeah.
and then you hear all this new stuff. You're like, where have I been in the past 20 years? You know. So
Right.
the I thought it was interesting. Is it called the Bigfoot Genome Project? Is that the data collecting, the DNA collecting?
So this was a while back. I think we're going up on 10 years ago.
Okay.
Dr. Melba Ketchum, that one.
Yeah, I've
Yeah. It's
heard
the
bits and
Sasquatch Genome
pieces.
Project, maybe, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
Yeah. I heard bits and pieces, but what was I have a feeling what the purpose of the project was, but what was the purpose of the project? What was the conclusion of the project, if you recall?
Yeah. So again, I'm just a guy who's a podcaster that talks to people about Bigfoot. So I am probably not the right person to talk about this, but for what I have gathered, and this could not be correct, but there was an individual that Dr. Ketchum was allegedly trying to take different specimens gathered from people and test the DNA on that. And this whole deal is a very, very it's a dividing line in the community like
Hmm.
you would not believe, because the from what I've heard, the results that were gathered, half the community just does not agree with it at all. I believe it points almost to um, half of the DNA being human, half of it not. And so a lot of people
Huh.
really don't like that. A lot of people really do like that. And it's a thing where, this happened about 10 years ago, but now it is being brought up in the community through different individuals. And so we're right back to where it is again. Now, um, there is another actually DNA project happening at the same time in current day, which is very interesting. And this is actually a state university sponsored one out of North Carolina State. Um,
Huh. Really?
I believe some solid info is going to start to come out from this, hopefully in 2025 this year. But
Oh my.
the gentleman's name is Darby Orcutt. He's an individual from that um, university, and he's been literally right now. You can, if you have anything, hair, any type of evidence, you can contact this individual and he will be like, okay, send it in. It's not going to cost you anything. We're going to test it, which is incredible because usually this DNA testing can cost you thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. But right now, this state school is like, yeah, let's check it out. It's been going
Wow.
on for, I want to say, maybe about a year and a half.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Is there what's the right word? A pattern to the hair? Like, I think of Mel Scahan, he claimed he had some kind of hair and
Okay.
they got to give it up pretty much. There's a long story to it. I'll let him tell that story one day. People can find the story
Mhm.
themselves. But, you know, how do you know you're out west? It's not elk mane or horsehair stuck. I mean, is there like an actual that stands out from other animals? Do you know of or?
Yeah. So there is, from talking to the people, other researchers I know, like Tate Hieronymus and Jonathan Easley, those guys. So pretty much when you have a hair and you're like, oh, this is probably a good candidate, you look at it under a high powered microscope. It's the inside part of the hair is not there.
Huh.
That is the big, and this is where I'm just gonna look super silly.
No, it's okay.
I want to
I
say
know
the
what you're
name
talking
of it is called medulla. I don't know, but that will give you enough to look into. The
about.
the internal part of the hair that humans will have
Uh-huh.
is not present in that what we found to be Sasquatch hair.
Interesting.
So
Interesting.
yeah.
Wow. That's interesting to see a university actually taking real samples and seeing the DNA and see what comes of it. So that's interesting to see that. Do you think a year from now they might have you said July of this year they might have the results published, you thought? Or no,
Um,
you're talking about something else. I apologize.
I was hoping out loud that Darby would be able to announce some results, hopefully this year, next year. Usually stuff like this gets announced around the Ohio Bigfoot Conference, which is one of the biggest conferences in the US when it comes to the Bigfoot subject. So hopefully this year, maybe something will be announced. I think I heard he'll be there with Matt Moneymaker doing some stuff. So,
Okay. Interesting. Another question. I'll let
mm,
you go after this, I promise.
all right.
Ohio DNR, about 3 or 4 years ago, they put on a Sasquatch awareness class. And I got a
Yeah.
friend that works the DNR and he kind of blew it off the DNR in Ohio. And he is like, well, I don't know. I don't know. He didn't, he's an aquatics biologist. That wasn't his specialty. Do you think when a government agency does that, do you think it's more of like, let's humor the public, or it's like, we have enough reports. We got to do something about this?
So it's extremely interesting, because there are different times when you'll see stuff kind of like show up on different government.
Mm-hmm.
Um, especially for certain areas of the US. And I think it's more that different areas are starting to realize, hey, if we put Bigfoot into our stuff, we could get a whole lot more people to come to this area, and then this is going to help our
Sure.
financial bottom line. For example, in Ohio, Salt Fork State Park is probably one of the best places you can go to look for Bigfoot. And that park really knows it. In fact, one of my buddies, John Hickenbottom, is
Whoa,
head
whoa, whoa, whoa,
naturalist
whoa.
there.
What's his last name? Hickenbottom?
John Hickenbottom. He's
Oh, that's
awesome, dude.
hilarious. That's my wife's
Yeah.
maiden name.
Oh, well, dude, maybe you guys are related.
I
He's
don't know.
got a
I should
cool
ask her.
mustache. You should. But he's head naturalist, and they lean into the subject because they know it brings people to their park. So let's give them what they want. And so they actually have Bigfoot nature hikes. Everything is Bigfoot. They got Bigfoot areas in the park. You know, the one side of me wants is, well, maybe it's soft disclosure. Maybe they're just going to start putting it out there. I think it probably comes down to, hey, let's get a little bit more money in our pockets, and let's give the public what they seem to want, and throw some
really
more
good
Bigfoot
marketing
stuff out there.
Yeah, that's understandable. That's understandable. So at the end of the day, your podcast and all this data you've collected, where do you think it's going? I mean, as we talked about, it seems like we're kind of transitioning to this different realm of thought, different realm of emotion. Do you think your podcast may be a bigger player than you realize? Do you think it might where do you think it's going in the whole term of this whole subject, do you think?
So my podcast specifically?
Yes.
Yeah. So what the goal of my podcast is, really at the end of the day, what I care about is to give an individual that has had an encounter a safe and respectful environment where they can share what happened to them and then be able to move on with the rest of their lives. So really the goal of my podcast isn't even to get Bigfoot discovered. It's more to help the people that are affected by it. But because I have, again, I forget people listen to it, but it has gotten pretty big.
It has.
And so man, if you could see my email, I get invited to some wacky stuff to do with Bigfoot. And dude, there's some stuff going on behind the scenes, and I really hope that some of it comes to fruition. And I think either this year or next year, there's going to be some wild stuff that starts coming out about Bigfoot. There is some research going on by people that don't want to be out in the public eye that is way crazier than anything. If you're looking into Bigfoot research currently, it's way crazier than that, man. So I don't know. I'm just like, Bigfoot fanboy. I hope that eventually we're able to get some solid, like, oh, we got one. Here it is. I don't want to see it in a zoo ever.
Yeah.
But I would love us to be able to like study it and like have it as a species that could then, there could be conservation involved with it. That would be cool. I don't know.
It'd be interesting because if this thing can truly speak to telepathically, you've had some viewers or guests claim they can speak multiple languages, and it's like more like learn from it and teach us in a way, how to, because really, if this thing is that highly intelligent and has abilities, but it lives a very primitive life, it's like, I think we got a lot to learn from that, if that's truly the case. That'd be interesting to see scientists sit around Bigfoot like he's some wise teacher.
No, I agree. It's getting that human involved that is both a scientist, but also has an open enough mind that if that was to happen, that wouldn't just be like, oh, shut it down, ET scenario, like stuff like that. Like that would have an open enough mind. And just to get an individual that's, those are probably so far between, we can only hope that would happen. But
sure. Well, there's some metaphysics out there that even Connie's talked to that been super connected. So you never know. Now I was curious, do you have a filter process if you get some people you're like, okay, this person's clearly schizophrenic, or do you just like, hey man, whatever you got, let's put it out there?
Um, there are a few that I did not even broach the hey, let's go out, let's come on the show, just because you can almost, I've talked to a lot of people, and you can get you get the difference pretty quick between a person that is scared out of their mind and
Yeah.
just needs to talk to someone, as opposed to someone who has like their own, you know, gospel that they've created, and they want to
Sure.
like, put it out there and become rich and famous, and oh hey, I wrote a book that I didn't tell you about, and here it is. And it's like,
Yeah. Right.
those have slipped through sometimes, but yeah, for the most part, I try to give people a place where they can share what they've experienced. But yeah, there are a few where they don't come on the show just because they're not even invited. But
Sure.
yeah,
No, it's understandable. One
yeah,
more question, I promise. When since you kind of come like a kind of a therapist or like a support group in a way,
kind of, yeah.
why do you think a lot of people just don't feel comfortable even talking to therapists? I get talking to your buddies, they're gonna josh you really bad for saying I saw Bigfoot in the woods. I'm like, you're drunk, John,
Mm.
But do you think a lot of people just are not comfortable talking to a therapist? And I'm just curious why. I'm curious the holdback, I guess.
So I think a lot of it comes down to, I experienced this out in Oregon at the festival. There's a lot of these guys, and especially like the hunters, the wilderness guides, the guys that are like, let's go out there and drink some beers and high five and like all that good stuff, right? That's
Yeah,
cool stuff, right?
sure, sure.
But then they didn't sign up to see this Bigfoot, and now they have this interaction that's happened, and now they're just like, they're totally blown away, because they're like, if I let this get out, I'm going to lose my job. No one's going to trust me as a wilderness guide out here in the Pacific
Oh,
Northwest,
sure.
because they think I'm crazy. I've talked to guides that if they see Bigfoot tracks, they take they wipe them out so that their people won't see them, that they're guiding,
Oh,
so that they won't think they're crazy. Like,
sure.
so I think a lot of it is that they're not coming forward because they're scared of what it's gonna do to their livelihood.
Sure.
Now, the cool thing about my show is that a lot of it does come from like secondhand referrals. Like, hey, my buddy listens to your show, and he knows that, hey, people like stuff. There is an individual on there. Something happened that was close to what I experienced, and I think it would be really helpful if you would just put it out there. There are times, I would say 99% of the people use fake names on the show, maybe like
Sure.
75%.
Sure.
Um, and yeah, I think it's just, there's a lot of people that are scared, but I think it's very helpful if that person is able to just, and it doesn't have to be my show. There are other shows out there like Wes from Sasquatch Chronicles,
Right.
there's Brian King Sharp from Sasquatch Odyssey, Miguel from Sasquatch Theory. There's a lot of good shows right now. But as long as you can just go to one of those shows and just get it out in the open, it not only helps you, but it helps the people that are listening. Your story could help, you know, connect the dots for someone else. And that's usually what happens in my show.
And
So,
that's awesome. And I gotta imagine some of these guys might experience like an ego death and they see like a 9 foot tall hairy beast man come out of nowhere. You're like, my whole world's upside down right now. So
oh, yeah, because they're not the top dog anymore. They're not the top of the food
yeah,
chain after they see that. So, yeah,
exactly. Exactly. Jeremiah, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this. It's been a really interesting conversation. If people want to check you out, where can people find you at, sir?
absolutely. Jesse, thank you so much for inviting me on your show. It's been a pleasure. The easiest way to see what I've got going on, see all the links, is to go to BigfootSocietyPodcast.com. and you can see all the links to all the social media networks and the YouTube channel and all the good stuff. If you do have a Bigfoot encounter, you can always email me directly, bigfootsociety@gmail.com. If you just want to share it off record, that's fine too. Or I can give you a place to share your story to get it off your chest, as it were. So
Awesome. Very beautiful. Everybody, thanks again for listening to the episode of the Beast Burn podcast. And please check out Jeremiah's podcast, and we'll just all take care. Thank you.